He saw her collapse before the glass could even slip from her hand. A moment that should have vanished amid the piano music and elegant laughter, yet it froze the entire room. Her dress was olive green, nothing eye-catching, but those eyes as she fell, no one could forget them. Terrified, as if she just realized she'd swallowed something that should never exist. Alden Ross moved on instinct. He couldn't recall how he pushed through the crowd. By the time he reached her, she was on her side, white foam spreading at her lips, her pulse fluttering wildly. Beside her, the champagne glass was still half full. Someone screamed for medical staff. But right then, Alden noticed something far more chilling. The security camera above them had gone dark. Exactly 1 minute before she took that drink. Alden didn't believe in coincidences. Over the past 3 years, he'd learned to read the signals everyone else ignored. And in that moment, beneath the glittering chandeliers of the grand ballroom, he knew for certain this woman wasn't just fainting. The hush that followed didn't last long. The sharp click of high heels stopped. Every gaze turned toward the man kneeling beside her. The one who should have stayed hidden in the shadows, Alden Ross. He had once been the golden symbol of the tech startup world. The man who took 3 apps public in 5 years and sold 2 of them to major corporations for nearly $500 million. But after his wife's sudden death in a commercial plane crash, Alden vanished from the spotlight, retreating to a quiet suburban home more than an hour outside the city, where he now lived with his little daughter, Mila. Their house wasn't anything special, except for the backyard overflowing with flowers Mila adored. He used to joke with her, "I'll buy land for flowers instead of stocks. Stocks lose value, but flowers always bloom on time." Though he lived quietly, Alden still poured his money into charities, scholarships for black students, and community funds for the homeless. Always under one condition: no one was allowed to put his name on any thank you plaque. He believed kindness didn't need a logo. Tonight's gala was one of those causes. The Second Light fundraiser, supporting children who once lived in temporary shelters, was held at the Sterling Hotel, a venue lavish enough to make the wealthy feel generous when they opened their wallets. Alden had been there from the start of the evening, standing in the shadows along the second-floor balcony where the lights couldn't reach him. He didn't like being seen. More than anyone, he understood. The most valuable things always happen behind the scenes. And from that very spot, he noticed the girl. She didn't look like the others. No designer labels, no date on her arm, and definitely not a name on the VIP guest list Alden had glimpsed on the organizer's assistant's iPad. Yet somehow, she'd made it in, and no one had stopped her. That alone caught his attention. She moved calmly, unhurried, but her eyes kept scanning the room, person by person, as if she were searching for someone, or hiding from someone. A few minutes later, a drink was handed to her by a waiter no one remembered seeing again. And then she collapsed. Alden knelt beside her, not waiting for permission. A security guard stepped forward, but Alden raised a hand. "Don't touch her. Call a doctor. She might have been poisoned." A mocking laugh rippled through the crowd. People thought it was a joke. But Alden wasn't joking. He leaned closer and saw a faint purplish tint around her lips. A metallic scent hung in the air. He knew that smell. He'd caught it once during an emergency first aid drill for his executive team back at his old company. She was still breathing, but her body trembled with small convulsions. No time to waste. Alden tilted her head back, checked her mouth with his hand, then leaned in, drawing the poison out with his own breath. For a moment, the world went silent. No voices, no music. Just the sharp bitterness burning across his tongue like acid. When he finally looked up, her eyes flickered open, terrified, stunned, before she slipped back into unconsciousness. The music stopped. In its place came a chorus of gasps and the rapid clicking of phone cameras. No one knew what had just happened. All they saw was a wealthy man, rarely seen in public, bending down to kiss a woman who had collapsed in the middle of the dance floor. Some screamed, some rushed forward, but most just lifted their phones, capturing what they thought was the scandal of the night. Alden kept one hand under the woman's head, the other on her shoulder, to steady her trembling body. The bitterness burned down his throat, thick with the stench of chemicals, something that felt like it was scorching his tongue from the inside out. She was still breathing, but weaker now. He tilted her head again, checking for a response, and that's when someone shouted from behind, "Get away! What the hell are you doing?" A security guard in a black suit rushed in, grabbing Alden by the arm. He spun around, voice low but razor sharp. Call a doctor. Right now. She's been poisoned, not fainted. The composure in his tone froze the larger man mid-motion. Around them, the murmurs began. A middle-aged woman gasped. Oh my God, that's Alden Ross. Has he lost his mind? Another man shook his head. Maybe she's his girlfriend. You know how these rich types are. No one believed it was an act of rescue. In a place this elegant, saving a life looked far too much like a scandal. When the hotel's medical staff finally arrived, Alden swept the woman into his arms and barked, Don't take her to the general emergency room. Private infirmary, 2nd floor. Call Dr. Carter. Use my number. No one dared to question him. Tall, broad-shouldered, his shirt clinging with sweat and splashed champagne, his eyes steady and commanding, people simply obeyed. In the elevator, she lay limp in his arms. The scent of cheap perfume mixed with that sharp metallic tang, pungent and strange. When the doors opened, Alden laid her gently on the bed in the medical suite and motioned for the door to close. A guard started to call the police, but Alden cut in firmly, Not yet. If someone poisoned her, they're still here. Bring the cops too soon, and we lose them. 10 minutes later, Dr. Carter arrived, a brisk, middle-aged woman carrying an emergency medical kit. What happened? Possible oral poisoning, Alden replied. Symptoms, convulsions, white foam, shallow breathing. She nodded once, swiftly injecting a broad-spectrum antidote into the woman's vein. Alden stepped back, a tingling spreading along his neck. The girl's body jerked slightly, her lips trembling as her pulse began to flicker beneath the skin. A few seconds later, her eyes flew open, wide, terrified. She bolted upright and slapped Alden hard across the face, the sound cracking through the small room. What did you do to me? Are you insane? Her voice was hoarse, strained from the poison. Alden didn't move. You were poisoned. I didn't have a choice. She glanced around, saw the syringe, the unfamiliar woman checking her pulse. Her trembling hand clutched the bedsheet. I don't know who you are. Why am I here? You collapsed in the ballroom. If I hadn't acted, you'd be dead. You expect me to believe that? Her eyes were cold and wary, laced with anger, born of fear. Dr. Carter broke in, her tone clinical but tense. The antidote's working, likely cyanide or a related compound, small dose fortunately. She turned to Alden. You need to be checked too. Your lips are blistering. He shook his head. I'm fine. She's the one who needs watching. She turned away, eyes glassy with tears. I don't know anyone here. I only came because... Her voice trailed off, hesitant. Because what? Alden leaned closer. She bit her lip, then shook her head. It doesn't matter. He studied her eyes. No deceit there. Only real confusion. A knock came at the door. Mr. Ross, a security officer said, the press is calling. Someone filmed the incident. They're saying you forcibly kissed a guest. Dr. Carter shot Alden a knowing look before he could even react. He exhaled slowly. She almost died, and all they see is a headline. He slipped back into his suit jacket, his tone calm but firm. Keep her here. Don't let anyone in. I'll handle this. As he stepped toward the door, the woman's voice broke through behind him. Wait! He stopped. I don't know anyone at that party. I didn't know why I was even there. Alden turned, surprise flickering across his face. You didn't invite anyone or get invited yourself? No. I just remember standing in the hall and someone handed me a glass of champagne. That's it. Carter glanced at Alden and gave a small shake of her head. She could be in a state of shock after poisoning. But Alden felt something else. A young woman, dressed plainly, not on the guest list, somehow inside an invite-only gala, and she couldn't remember who handed her the drink. He didn't believe in coincidence. And the single question that echoed in his mind was, if she didn't belong here, who arranged for her to appear tonight? Alden stood in the Sterling Hotel's security control room, eyes fixed on the monitor, replaying footage from the gala's start. The ceiling lights reflected off the tempered glass in front of him, forming pale halos. Beside him, the technical manager scrolled through frames, rewinding seconds at a time. I need to see her coming in, Alden said. Any entrance will do. Main door, hallway, staff stairwell. The manager swallowed hard. We've checked every entry point, Mr. Ross. There's no footage of that woman before 7:52 p.m., the exact moment she collapsed. Alden didn't respond right away. He leaned closer to the frozen frame showing the ballroom, the girl standing by the bar, olive green dress, alert eyes, but no footage of her entering. He exhaled slowly. Then, how did she get in? No one in the room answered. Alden turned and strode downstairs to the first floor, where an assistant waited with a tablet containing the full list of guests, staff, and vendors. He typed in the woman's name, Hannah Monroe, and scrolled through every result. Nothing. Not on the guest list. Not among the volunteers, catering crew, or event partners. She doesn't exist, he muttered. He dialed the head of security. I want the full list of everyone who served drinks tonight. The staffing agency, their names, ID photos, everything. Cross-check every person present between 7 and 8 p.m. In the medical room, only she and Dr. Carter remained. Hannah sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers gripping the gray sheet, eyes lost somewhere far beyond the walls. Carter had stepped out a few minutes earlier to fetch more medication, leaving behind a heavy silence. Alden entered quietly and closed the door behind him. She looked up at the sound, her eyes deep, still carrying the weight of fear that hadn't dried since she woke. "What's your name?" he asked, straight to the point. "Hannah," she answered slowly. "Hannah Monroe." "There's no such name on any list, not on the guest roster, not in staff records. Cameras show no sign of you entering." "How did you get in?" She stayed silent for a long moment, then softly, "I can't tell you." "Why? Because you don't remember, or because you're not allowed to?" Her gaze met his. "Because if I tell you, I don't know how long I'll stay alive." Alden leaned against the edge of the desk, arms folded. "Then give me one reason not to call the police. Right now, you look exactly like an intruder, someone who slipped into a private event and nearly died from a poisoned drink no one remembers serving you." She closed her eyes and drew a shaky breath. "I'm running," she said quietly. "From someone. A man who once called me his puppet. He can buy camera systems, rig guest lists, erase me from any database. And if you think I was poisoned by accident, then you don't know what he's capable of." Alden's gaze didn't waver. "What's his name?" "I won't say it. But I know I'm not supposed to be here. This event, it's the last place I should have come. But I didn't have a choice." Alden felt something slip through his thoughts like a wisp of smoke. Not the instinct that she was hiding guilt, but that she was hiding fear. An old fear, deep-rooted, the kind that drives someone to risk stepping into a crowd rather than keep running through the dark. He turned toward the table and pulled out a champagne glass sealed in an evidence bag, collected earlier by the staff. "This glass," he said evenly. "Do you remember who gave it to you?" Hannah shook her head. "I didn't see his face clearly. A man in a waiter's uniform, carrying a tray. But I didn't know him. He came over and offered me a drink. I thought it was part of the gala service, complimentary." Alden nodded slowly. "That waiter isn't on the staff list." She tilted her head slightly. "You're sure about that?" "Sure." She gave a faint, scornful laugh. "Then you see it. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted me dead, and they have enough power to get in here without leaving a trace." Alden was silent, his mind racing faster than he wanted to admit. Too many gaps. A woman with no name appearing at an invite-only gala, drinking from a glass handed by a waiter who doesn't exist on any list, then being poisoned in front of hundreds of witnesses. He pulled out his phone and texted his assistant. "Have IT trace all ID badge scans for the 2 hours before the gala. Filter for invalid badges, clone cards, or any unidentified Bluetooth devices in range." Hannah stood, swaying slightly, gripping the edge of the bed. "What are you going to do?" "Find out who you are, and who wants you dead." "You won't find me," she said, her gaze darkening. "Not because I'm hiding, because I don't exist under that name anymore." Alden paused, tilting his head. She continued slowly, each word carving into the air. "Hannah Monroe is a name I chose. But it's not my real name. I haven't used my real name in a very long time." Alden said nothing right away when she declared that her name wasn't real. He simply stood there, eyes cold, quietly studying her face as if measuring each inch of expression. For a few seconds no one spoke. Then he stepped slowly closer, his voice dropping a notch. "I risked my life to save you, and right now I still don't know who I saved." She looked at him and exhaled, as if she'd held a heavy stone inside for too long. "My name is Saren Blake." She sat down, hands clasped together. 3 years ago I was an intern at an independent newsroom in Boston. I worked under an investigative reporter named Louise Harrow. Alden remained silent. Only the faint hum of the air conditioner filled the medical room and the distant sounds of the gala continuing, as if nothing had happened. Louise was digging into a case involving cross-border money transfers, money laundering through shell companies. I wasn't allowed near the main files, but once she left her laptop open, I only glanced. I didn't touch anything. But... Her voice broke. 3 months ago, I applied for a job at an NGO. When HR ran my background check, they told me I was under investigation for being linked to a chain of offshore accounts in my name. I thought they were mistaken. Alden sat down in the chair across from her. Sarah nodded. I hired a friend who studied IT with me to pull data from open archives. And then I found me in the internal system of a corporation called Orvindex Holdings. I'd never worked for them, but on record I was the regional chief financial officer for North America. There were my signatures, tax filings, bank accounts in my name, all legit, like I'd worked there for 5 years. Alden gripped the armrests. They swapped your identity. They used my identity to funnel money through shell companies, Saren said, her voice tightening. And I'm sure I'm not the only victim. But the problem is, I don't have enough evidence to expose them, just suspicions, and one name tied to it all. Alden's head lifted. Camille Ross, your ex-wife. Alden's chest tightened. The name still carried weight, even after 3 years. How do you know Camille? We never met in person, but I emailed her once, after I discovered she'd collaborated with Louise on a few investigative reports about underground financial networks. Camille replied with an encrypted message, a letter. Very short, and to this day, I haven't been able to decode it. Saren reached into her bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, creased and worn from being hidden too long. She unfolded it and handed it to him. On it was a string of mixed characters, uppercase letters, numbers, and a few symbols. Too long to be a simple password, too short for a full cipher. I think Camille uncovered something, and she wanted me to find the one person who could decipher this. Alden looked up, his voice quiet but weighted. Me? You were the last person Camille trusted, Saren said quietly. The only one she mentioned in her letter. She wrote, if I disappear, give this to A. That's all. Alden looked down at the code again, his gaze lingering on the last 3 characters, CMR. He slipped the paper into his jacket pocket. And that's why someone wanted you silenced before you could reach me. And they almost succeeded. Saren leaned back, eyes tracing the ceiling. When I woke up, the first thing I thought was that I shouldn't have come here. I was terrified I dragged the only person who could help me into this. Do you think someone inside Orvindex knows you've been digging? Alden asked. She nodded. I used VPNs, encrypted email, fake names, but like I said, this person can buy entire systems. I used to think my identity was the one thing I could still control. Turns out, it was stolen long before I even realized it. Alden didn't ask anything more. He rose and walked to the window, staring out at the hotel garden. His hand still burned faintly from the poison's trace, but that sting was nothing compared to the jolt running through his mind. The woman before him wasn't an intruder. She was a lead. And that code might be the final message Camille ever left behind. 3 hours later, Saren lay on a leather chaise in the guest house behind Alden's estate, wrapped in the thin blanket his daughter usually used for reading. The single floor lamp cast a soft amber glow, easing the lines of strain from her face. Outside, a fine rain whispered against the fogged window. Alden entered carrying 2 glasses of water and a laptop already open to Camille's old email archive. There's a thread I've never seen before, he said, setting the glass beside her. Not in the main inbox. Camille stored it in a locked folder. It needs a second password. My guess is that string of characters you gave me. Saren sat up, a spark of life flickering in her eyes. You cracked it? Alden nodded. Partially, just enough to unlock a thread titled Birds Fly Far, Remember Old Wings. In one of the last messages, Camille wrote, if things go too far, find Rhys M. He made mistakes, but he never betrayed me. Saren repeated the name slowly. Rhys M. You know him? I've seen his name in one of Camille's old investigations, she said. Back then, Rhys was a senior data analyst at an investment firm. He was accused of leaking internal files to the press. After that scandal, he disappeared from the industry. Alden opened another browser tab, pulling up old press records. Full name, Rhys McAllister. No professional record in the past 3 years. Last known address, a small town called Elmside, up north. Saren looked up, resolve tightening in her voice. We have to go there. Elmside was so quiet the GPS lost signal halfway there. They arrived late the next afternoon, having rented an SUV at the airport, less traceable than anything tied to their names. Rhys's apartment was on the 3rd floor of an aging complex near an abandoned industrial zone. The door wasn't locked, just pulled to, an odd detail in a neighborhood where even the dogs didn't bark at strangers. Alden lifted his phone, camera light on, while Saren stepped in first, scanning every corner. The living room was layered in dust, but nothing looked ransacked. The computer tower sat open, its hard drive removed. On the dining table, a half-empty glass of water remained, as if the tenant had stepped out moments ago and never returned. "He really is gone," Saren whispered. In the bedroom, Alden found a small safe hidden behind the bookshelf. Old but untouched. He slipped off his gloves and turned the dial carefully. 4 failed tries. On the 5th, the lock clicked open. Inside was a thick stack of documents, double-sided printouts, several photos developed from film, and a USB drive labeled in messy handwriting. Hudson Apex, Phase 7. Saren picked up the top page. Independent audit report? No. These are transfer records, offshore transactions, shell companies. Alden sat down on the edge of the bed, scanning another sheet. "My name was on these once." Saren turned toward him. "What do you mean?" "I invested in Hudson Apex 5 years ago," Alden said. They were a rising fund back then, secretive, specialized in backing startups with what they called flexible financial structures. I pulled out after 2 quarters. Their cash flow management didn't make sense. "Did Camille know?" Saren asked softly. "She asked me once," Alden said quietly. "I didn't think much of it. She said she was just researching investment models. I never imagined it was tied to any investigation." Saren flipped to the final page. "There's a handwritten note here. Mackenzie Aviation, recheck maintenance contract." She looked up sharply. "That's the maintenance company for Camille's flight, isn't it?" Alden unlocked his phone and pulled up the old flight records. "Yes, the airline outsourced maintenance to Mackenzie right before that trip, but no one ever mentioned anything unusual." Saren gripped the papers tighter. If Hudson Apex funded Mackenzie and Camille was investigating Hudson, then that crash might not have been an accident. Silence settled between them, thick and heavy. The room seemed to shrink with the weight of what neither wanted to admit. Alden finally moved, pacing once around the room, one hand on his hip. "You think they realized Camille knew too much, and when they couldn't silence her any other way, they staged the crash. And me," Saren said, her voice trembling slightly, "I'm next. Because I have the letter, and because Camille mentioned me." Alden stopped at the window. Outside was a world sound asleep, blissfully unaware of the rot buried under layers of finance, investments, and a plane crash that was never just a tragedy. He turned back to her. "We keep digging, but not here." Saren nodded. "Before someone realizes we're retracing Camille's steps." They left Elmside as dusk sank into a slate-gray sky, the air thick with the damp scent of rain from earlier. Saren sat in the passenger seat, clutching the bundle of Reese's documents pressed inside her canvas bag. Alden kept both hands steady on the wheel, eyes locked on the empty stretch of road ahead. The SUV's taillights cast red reflections across the slick asphalt. "Do you feel like someone's following us?" Saren asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Yes," Alden said quietly, "since we left the parking lot." Behind them, 2 headlights suddenly surged forward. Alden glanced at the rearview mirror, then jerked the wheel hard, turning onto an unpaved side road. The car behind followed, relentless, its speed unbroken. Saren gripped the door handle tight. "They're not police." "No." The SUV jolted violently over potholes, tires skidding on a thin layer of mud. Alden swerved through a thicket of brush, then killed the headlights without warning. The pursuing vehicle shot past, unaware they'd vanished. Alden spun the wheel, steering back toward the forest, accelerating just enough to disappear into the trees. The hum of the engine faded as he shut it off completely. Darkness swallowed them. For a few moments, the only sound was the thud of their hearts. "We've shaken them off for now," Alden whispered. But before either could exhale, a sharp crack split the night. The unmistakable sound of a gunshot. Alden lurched forward. "Sniper," he shouted, yanking Saren down against the seat. The window beside him splintered, a spiderweb of cracks blooming across the glass as blood streamed from his left shoulder, soaking through his jacket. "You're hit." "Just a graze, out of the car, now." They bolted into the forest, feet snagging on roots and broken branches. Saren kept her arm under his, feeling the sticky warmth of blood seeping through his shirt. After a few hundred meters, a small, decrepit cabin emerged through the trees, rusted tin roof, one shutter hanging loose. They stumbled inside and barred the door with a rotted wooden beam before collapsing onto the dusty floorboards. Saren tore open Alden's shirt and pressed a folded scarf from her pack against the wound. "You need stitches, now." "Later," he said through clenched teeth. "They won't fire unless they know where we are. We've got cover. For the moment." Saren sank down beside him, breath still uneven. You almost died because of me. Alden met her eyes, his voice low, steady. No, because of Camille, I'm still alive. They sat in silence for a while. In the darkness of the cabin, neither could really see the other's face, only the sound of breathing and the heavy space between words left unsaid. Camille trusted me once, Saren said softly, her voice trembling. I never understood why. I was just an intern. I never did anything to deserve it. You're not the only one who's felt that way, Alden replied. Camille had a gift. She saw what others missed. Saren reached into her backpack and pulled out an old phone. I want to try the code again. After what we found from Reese, I think I finally understand how Camille encrypted it. She opened a notes app and retyped the entire string of characters, carefully, one by one. But instead of using a standard decrypting tool, she launched a custom script, the kind only someone with a background in cybersecurity would know how to run. 5 minutes passed in complete silence. After the final tap, the screen flickered. Access granted. Archive unlocked. Saren handed the phone to Alden. This is Camille's hidden archive. No one ever found it because it's hosted on a masked server, only accessible with 2 layers of authentication, the code and a single verified IP address. Alden scrolled through the list that appeared. Videos, audio files, email logs, photos, financial maps, an entire 2-year investigation compressed into digital ghosts. Saren kept scrolling. These are her collected proofs. The money laundering trails, shady contracts between Hudson Apex and its shell fronts, even the flowcharts showing how the funds move through intermediary banks in Europe and the Caribbean. Alden's brow furrowed. There's one file here, labeled Owen.ai callscan.mp4. He tapped it. The sound of a man's voice filled the small cabin, calm, confident, echoing slightly like a conference room recording. Saren froze. Then she looked up slowly. That's your friend. Alden nodded, his face hardening. Owen was the first investor in Hudson Apex. I once asked him to vet the fund. Camille asked me about Owen too, but I thought it was just curiosity. Now, he stood up, eyes razor sharp. Owen didn't just know. He was the one in the middle, protecting the whole operation. Saren clenched her hands. And if we publish everything, they'll hunt us down and finish the job. Alden looked up toward the broken window, where the first light of dawn slipped through the trees. Then we gamble. If Camille sacrificed herself to get this archive into the open, staying quiet would be the worst betrayal. Saren nodded. This story won't end with us running anymore. Alden pulled a satellite phone from his pack and began dialing a string of numbers. I know someone who can release this without being controlled. And this time, Owen won't have any warning about when we strike. 48 hours after they sent the entire archive to an independent journalist, Camille's closest former collaborator in multiple investigations, the name Hudson Apex dominated the front page of nearly every major paper. Alden had chosen well. The journalist, Declan Yates, hadn't worked for any mainstream outlet in over 5 years. He lived off freelance exposés, had been threatened with lawsuits more times than anyone could count, and never once pulled a story. Camille used to tell Alden, Declan doesn't do journalism to make a living. He lives to do journalism. Within a week, the FBI was involved. Hudson Apex's assets were frozen. Several major investment figures were detained for questioning. But the biggest blow wasn't to Hudson. It was to Owen. Alden didn't attend the federal press conference. He sat alone in his study, eyes fixed on the live stream showing the man who used to be his closest friend being led out of company headquarters in handcuffs. Owen didn't look at the cameras. Head bowed, silent, offering no defense, no reaction. Saren sat on the window ledge, scrolling through the endless stream of headlines lighting up her phone. Owen was the fund coordinator. He managed the rotation of laundered money through venture investments. She lowered the phone and looked up at Alden. Camille was right. He didn't just know, he orchestrated it. Alden didn't answer. His eyes no longer held anger, only emptiness, the quiet weight of realizing he'd lost someone he had once chosen to believe in, despite the doubts that had always lingered. Erasing the forged data tied to Saren's identity took nearly 2 weeks. Alden's lawyer hired a digital security team to scrub every trace of the fake profile that had been built under her name. When the process was done, Saren finally regained control of her real identity, Saren Elise Blake, with every legal record restored to its original state. But she didn't use that name right away. I'll need to stay off the grid for a while, she said one quiet morning as they sat together on the porch of the guest house. Not because I'm afraid, because I need to figure out who I am after all this. Alden understood. It had taken him 3 years to learn how to live after Camille's death. He knew recovery didn't come with applause or recognition. It came in silence, one breath, one step at a time, when you could finally look in the mirror and no longer see someone broken. A month later, Alden officially declined an offer to return as a partner at a major investment firm. His statement was brief: "I no longer see myself belonging to a world where money is valued more than the truth." Instead, Alden founded a small organization, the Camille Ross Foundation, dedicated to supporting independent investigative journalists, the kind of people doing the work society still needs, but too often forgets. On the day the foundation officially opened, his daughter Mila cut the ribbon herself. There were no reporters, no cameras, only the people whose lives had once been changed by Camille. Saren didn't attend. But that morning, Alden found a sealed envelope on his desk. The handwriting was firm, slightly slanted, the unmistakable script of someone trained in journalism. Inside was a single handwritten note. "Thank you for kissing me to save my life. But what you really saved was the part of me that had stopped wanting to live it. I used to believe my only worth was in running, from my past, from my mistakes, from the fear of being seen. But you showed me the truth doesn't kill us. It's living without facing it that does. I will come back, not to hide, but to stand up the way Camille once did. And when I do, I hope you'll understand. It's because you never let go." There was no signature, but Alden knew exactly who had written it. He folded the letter and placed it in the drawer. In that moment, in the quiet room awash with morning light, he didn't feel loss. He felt what Camille once called the rebirth of courage, something that doesn't need a happy ending, only someone willing to keep going. No one knew what would become of Saren. No one could say whether Alden would ever love again. But one thing was certain: the truth had finally been spoken, not through microphones, but through action. And somewhere in the world, maybe in a small cafe, a quiet library, or a tiny newsroom, there was a woman writing. Not to hide anymore, but to continue a story that had once come so close to being erased.